Good morning and welcome to our Red Tower group. I hope everybody's doing well today, wherever you may be. We're contemplating and studying Rinpoche's book, Change of Heart, written together with Lama Shenpen, who's a wonderful Lama in New Mexico that runs a center called the Iron Knot Ranch. If you've lived nearby or have an inclination to do so, I recommend going and meeting her, receiving teachings. She was one of the people that inspired me very early on to study with Chagdud Rinpoche, because the first time I went there, Rinpoche himself was not there. And I was so impressed with his senior students, who at the time were Jane, Kadro now, David, Lama Norbu, Win, Ke Lama Drime, and Lisa, who is now Lama Shenpen. And I thought to myself, wow, if Rinpoche's students are so impressive, he himself must be unbelievable, which turned out to be the case. So we're continuing to talk about anger. And somebody asks Rinpoche a question. Rinpoche, you've spoken again and again about the negative consequences of expressing anger, and it's troubling me. One of the biggest difficulties a battered or abused woman faces is that everyone, her family, friends, priest, all of them counsel her against anger. But when I'm helping a woman whose husband beats her, I tell her to get angry. That first step of getting angry seems necessary because women are not taught to stand up for themselves. If I advise a battered woman to be compassionate, she'll just put up with her husband, and he'll keep going until he kills her, the children, or maybe all of them. On the other hand, I've definitely noticed that if she stays angry, her anger eventually turns to hatred. Rinpoche answers, when we feel love and compassion, we don't need anger in order to act. If this woman's child or mother were suffering, she would not need anger to respond. Anger, as a poison of the mind, has less power and stability than love or compassion. It is like a blazing fire that quickly burns itself out. In a moment of rage, she may find courage, but when the anger subsides, so will her courage. She won't be motivated to find a solution until another incident incites her. With anger, there is always hope that her husband will change, hope that the problem will just go away. When her anger fades, hope will take over, and she'll end up back in an unresolved situation that's dangerous for her husband as well as for herself and her family. The cycle of angrily leaving him and then returning will produce a very unstable home environment, and she may find herself even more at risk. Loving kindness and compassion don't come and go that way. Like a steady source of fuel, they sustain change. They provide a solid foundation for action. If the woman's motivation is one of love and compassion, she won't want her husband to continue making negative karma. She will understand that staying with him won't make either of them happy, but will only cause more suffering. If, with calm, selfless thinking and intention, she makes a decision to leave, she will stick to it. In counseling women in the past, I have asked them if they think that patience will work. If a woman tells me that her relationship is basically sound, I advise her to be patient, to back off when an argument arises. However, when a woman is certain that she can no longer remain with her partner, that staying with him will produce more harm than benefit, and that neither she nor her partner are happy, then there is no reason at all for her to stay. Then this person continues asking along this line of questioning. A woman often sees some good in her partner and fools herself into thinking he'll be that way all the time. He may be kind 20% of the time, But if she's in denial, she convinces herself that he's kind 80% of the time. In this case, how should we counsel her? Rinpoche answers, if she doesn't have some clarity about her relationship, there's nothing much you can do. But if her thinking is clear, she can look at the situation with compassion and take effective action. Then somebody asks, what about during therapy when you sit across from an empty chair? Visualize that someone I was mad at is sitting there and then beat a pillow. The idea is that if I can get my anger out, I can be healed. What do you think of that sort of method? Rinpoche answers, a method like that seems beneficial. You might experience a kind of release that comes from getting something off your chest. But it won't produce lasting happiness because it involves separating me from other and acting on the attachment and aversion that subsequently arise. Even though you are venting your anger at a visualized person, you are still expressing very negative energy and reinforcing the habits of duality and anger. For countless lifetimes, we have vented our anger. Were this a way of releasing permanently, we would all be enlightened by now, but the opposite is true. Our anger has only become more strongly embedded in our mind, manifesting as negative experiences that further trigger this poisonous emotion. It is true that if we try to suppress our anger, we will only give it more power. But rather than acting it out with body and speech, we can liberate it mentally, or we can simply let it subside. That's a very, very important difference that Buddhism brings to the table. Is most psychologists, most psychological approaches talk about two options: expressing or suppressing. And most of the time, a psychological approach will choose the option of expressing whatever negative emotion or strong emotion arises. Because suppressing, usually it'll come out at some point in time and probably in an even worse fashion. The example they use is like burying a piece of meat. It's just going to get more rotten and stinky and unbearable. It's the same thing when we suppress our negative emotions. So then if it's not good to suppress, and we know that expressing a negative emotion also is not the best, then what options are left to us? And that's where Buddhism comes in with the idea of liberating. So how do we liberate? Well, there's many different levels in Buddhism. For example, one form of liberating is to apply the antidote. So for example, in the cause of anger, the antidote is patience and love and compassion. That slowly dissolves the anger. The other option is through mantra recitation or visualization of the deity. And another option is liberating through meditative experience. And why is this possible, or how is this possible? Because ultimately, all thoughts and all emotions don't have a true lasting nature. All of them on their own at some point go away. All of them on their own at some point dissolve. So through meditation techniques, we just accelerate the dissolution through the incredible methods that are given to us by the Buddha. So that's the third option that the meditator takes, the option of dissolving whatever negative emotion, whatever negative thought happens to arise. Neither suppressing nor expressing. That's why we practice, and that's why we call it practice, because when we do a sadhana practice like Tara, we're training our mind how to get to that space. So when a negative emotion or a negative thought takes over your mind or your body, Go to your Tara practice. Go to your visualization of Tara. Go to your mantra recitation. The word mantra means protection for the mind. If you can hold a steady visualization of Tara, no negative emotion can remain. And sometimes it's like a tug of war. Maybe you can visualize Tara for a little while, and then all of a sudden your mind goes back to that old problem and you start spinning out. And then you remember, oh no, I'm meditating on Tara. And then you bring your mind back. Slowly, the more you train your mind like a muscle, the less pull that these negative thoughts and emotions will have on you.